Welcome to First. I'm Mark Eichman along with Michelle Polston. Shirley Mann will have a story later in the show.
Wilmington police believe they are slowly turning the violence trend in the city. An intervention group is credited with helping.
A simple act of kindness during the Vietnam War has changed the way the military receives mail. A report this week on the power of the pen.
And experience the paintings of the 19th century and how they come together in Odessa.
Also, conversations this week with Governor Markell and Senator Carper. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
While government agencies try to figure out how to fund the fight against violence in Wilmington, one program is showing some results. Cease Violence looks to stop gun shootings at the source. First Look spent some time with the group to see how they work and what kind of results it brings.
You should want better for your children. We don't have to bury them. We don't.
That's just part of a strong message Derek Chambers delivered to residents near 6th and Broome Streets in Wilmington, just feet from where a young man was gunned down. Chambers is a familiar face around here. He's known along with these other men to preach peace to young people under the program Cease Violence.
Sometimes you got to get through their pride because they still got street codes that they hold on to. Early on in the program, you know, they didn't really know what the program was about. You know, but from seeing me out there every day, they kind of loosened up.
I think it's very important that they come out here, you know, to get the children's attention as well as the adults' attention, you know, because we need to cease the violence, really. It's imperative that we do.
Ursula Anderson lives in this neighborhood where a makeshift memorial now sits after a young man was killed outside of her home. At one time, she says this area was fairly quiet, but not anymore.
You always hear gunshots, you know what I'm saying? Well, for it to be this close to my home was a shocker to me. And then to see someone laying here like he was, that was a double shocker.
The reaction from Anderson is why outreach is very important and personal to Robert Cannon of Cease Violence. Cannon makes it his business to hand out literature promoting safer communities. The other reason is his two sons.
I also am a victim of crime. I had two sons that got killed in the street of Wilmington in less than 9 months apart.
Thankfully, Cannon finds strength through Cease Violence, as well as some of his other colleagues.
I got out of prison. I wanted to do something different, you know, for my life. You know, I was a drug dealer for a long time, and about 3 to 4 years before I got out of prison, I changed my mindset. And I said to myself, I don't want to be part of the problem no more. I want to be part of the solution.
Now, Brown spends much of his time talking to young people about doing positive things. He considers his new chance at life a round-the-clock job, especially since he's always on call to talk to shooting victims and high-risk youth about the dangers of retaliation.
A guy might call you and say, I'm ready to go shoot somebody. You can't tell him, I'll come get you tomorrow. That's not going to work. You have to be right there to be able to babysit this guy, to try to talk him down so that, you know, he might not, you know, resort to an act of violence, because you could save his life or you could save somebody else's life.
To date, more than 24 young people have been helped through Cease Violence that's done in connection with Christiana Care Health System, and the list continues to grow.
I was young, reckless, running with the wrong guys, got mixed up, got locked up, things like that. And so once I got older, once I hit 18, was going back and forth since 18, so now I'm 23, so I lost family members to gun violence, friends to gun violence, friends to jail, family to jail, so ever since I got in the program, like, things have been awesome.
Every week, members of Cease Violence come together to discuss a number of ways to promote peace, canvass high crime areas, mediate conflicts, and provide survivor support. The job may present challenges, but to this group, they're determined to tackle one thing.
The main thing we're trying to do in the city of Wilmington is interrupt violence and change the culture. Because if you can get to the main source, it's like a domino effect.
One thing you did not get to see in the story is the men hard at work inside the hospital. Every time there is a shooting in Wilmington, the hospital sends out a text or a call to Ronald Brown, who will then jump in the car and ride to Christiana to not only encourage the victim or victim's family from retaliating, but to also help high-risk youth enroll in school or to help that person seek employment.
So does the Cure Violence program focus strictly on high-risk men or women as well?
Mark, high-risk youth include both men and women. In fact, some of the mediators frequent women detention centers as well. And I also like to add, although teenagers are considered more so high risk, mediators have also reached out to adults to get them right on track.
All right, thanks, Nichelle. You can follow our reporting on the Wilmington violence situation on your place for daily Delaware news, newsworks.org/Delaware. For the last 6 years, Governor Jack Markell has appeared on First right around this time to talk about the just completed Delaware legislative session. Governor, welcome back to First.
Thanks.
So in January, you called this year's budget, $3.9 billion budget, very difficult. We're kind of ominous in the way you presented it about the struggle that it was going to be. Are you happy with the way it came out?
I think it came out about as well as it might have. I was right in January. It turned out to be a very difficult budget, and I'm glad it's behind us.
It turned out to be a very long night. Were you expecting as long of a night as it turned out to be with money moving around?
We knew it would take a while. Didn't think it would quite take till like 5:45 in the morning. Very pleased that we got the transportation projects funded. That's something that I've been working on for a couple of years now. And within the budget itself, continue to invest in education, new money for substance abuse treatment, which is really important given the fact that Delaware loses somebody every other day to an overdose. So a lot of important things did get funded in the budget, and a lot of important bills got passed as well.
And so the transportation, which we've talked about, I think, for 2 years now, is finally settled. That's behind us. There's no, we don't have the chunk of concrete here with us today. It's in the past now. That's settled.
Yeah, and so now, you know, the good news is a lot of important projects will actually get worked on.
Another thing that was part of the budget put together was $31 million from mortgage settlement money that would go to filling some holes. Something similar that California did, and then were sued, and a judge ruled that the state couldn't do that. Are you confident that Delaware is in a better position than, say, California was in using those types of funds in the budget?
Well, I don't know all the details in California. I know it was a very different settlement, and when Delaware, for the settlement that California got sued on, Delaware got that money a couple years ago and used it on a lot of the, you know, important things to help homeowners and the like. In this case, 31 out of about, I think, 61 million in total from a couple of different settlements was used, and so I'm glad they didn't spend all of it. Some left over, but still, you know, in terms of getting out of there with a reasonable budget, I think they did a decent job.
Attorney General Matt Denn, one of the people voicing kind of a dissenting opinion on using that money for what it was used for. Have you talked to him about his concerns there? I
haven't talked to him since the General Assembly completed their work. I actually support the Attorney General's views. He came out with his plan very early on, I think back in January, right after he was sworn in. I thought he had a lot of good ideas, and I'm hoping that we can do some of those kinds of initiatives as well.
Looking over the legislative session, there's just so much volume of things that gets done. It's really hard to, in the limited time that we have, go through everything. But it seems like one of the highlights was a series of bills that addressed women's issues in the state. Would you say that that's one of the top highlights of what got accomplished this year?
Yeah, I think the Women's Caucus, which included a lot of men, actually did some really important work. And I also think some of the work that we did around regulatory reform, something that I announced in my State of the State speech as being important, those bills got done. The work that we've done to advance and to make it more likely that we get the Christina School District out of the city of Wilmington is important. It's not done yet, but we made some really important progress there. We made additional progress on changing the way that we compensate educators to make it possible so skilled educators who want to stay in the classroom don't feel like they have to go and become an assistant principal in order to make more money. So we're encouraged by that as well.
One thing that did pass was the testing opt-out bill. We've heard a lot about that over the last 6 months of the legislative session. Where do you stand on that?
I've never liked that bill. I think, in large part, as I've heard from particularly members of the civil rights communities, they feel like they're very concerned about the impact on kids of color and low-income kids more broadly if the opt-out bill were to become the law. So I've actually not yet received it from the legislature, but we'll be taking a hard look at that in the coming days.
What's the issue with minority children? What's the problem?
They feel that, and I think this is what they've seen around the country, that these are the kids who are most likely to fall through the cracks, and it's something that's really important that we not allow these kids to fall through the cracks.
A lot of discussion about education this year, as I mentioned. Do you feel like some of that is sort of referendum on Secretary of Education Mark Murphy, that there's sort of this, there's kind of a pushback from a lot of different sectors?
I think there's a pushback in large part because we're pushing hard. And what's most important to me is the progress that we're making. Graduation rate increased significantly in the last year alone. More kids taking and passing AP, the advanced placement exams. College access doing extraordinarily well. Our pathways to prosperity for kids who want to get work experience while they're still in high school. Again, really great progress. So to me, in the end, what's most important is the progress that our students are making, and they're making some really good progress.
But it's been a big month, June, in Dover, as far as entertainment goes. You have the NASCAR races, Firefly Festival, followed by the inaugural Big Barrel Festival this year. Brought a lot of new people here. We talked to a lot of them. One of the new people we talked to who's visiting Delaware for the first time was Mariah from Greencastle, PA. Let's see what she had to say.
Okay.
You come down to Delaware a lot. Have you ever been to Delaware before?
No, actually a friend from school lives in Delaware. It's my first time being here. She always talks it up and I'm like, this is pretty cool for Delaware, I'll have to say.
So this kind of put Delaware on the map for you?
Will probably come back.
So it's kind of the typical thing that we heard from people talking to them at festivals. Their first impression, Delaware, but then they came and saw the festivals and what it had to offer and kind of enjoyed themselves almost surprisingly in Delaware.
Of course they enjoy themselves when they visit Delaware. The only people who enjoy Delaware more than those who visit are those who live here.
Right.
So we encourage people, because we have a lot of folks from around the area who might commute into Wilmington. We have people, or into Delaware, some folks go the other way. We want them all living right here because this is an amazing state with so many wonderful opportunities.
To live and work. As I've heard.
Yes.
So how does the state tourism department capitalize on, obviously, Big Barrel, Firefly, huge draws to get people here? How do we stretch that out through the rest of the year?
Well, it is an amazing opportunity for us to get folks to visit the first time. And when they do, and they get to see what Delaware's all about, we want them to keep coming back and, to go to our restaurants, to stay in our motels and hotels, and to visit all of our sites, to go to the beaches, to be in the Brandywine Valley. We have so much to offer, and so, part of it, our Economic Development Office, Division of Tourism, endless discoveries.
Right.
So the Firefly and Big Barrel, great way to sort of get your feet wet, but we want people coming back to discover all of those endless discoveries.
All right, maybe we'll have Mariah back here to do a testimonial on her time spent here in Delaware. Governor Jack Markell, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
And you can see the governor's conversation in its entirety at newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, the story of how military mail was changed through an act of Delaware kindness. And our first experience takes in a different style of painting, a visit to Odessa later.
It used to be our soldiers overseas could only receive care packages and letters of support specifically addressed to them. That is, until a Delawarean wrote in to Dear Abby and turned the whole system upside down. Here's David Rice's story. In 1967, a 19-year-old David Rice was a private serving in Vietnam. He was drafted.
We were over there doing the best we could. A lot of us weren't volunteering, but you got drafted, so you had to go. And of course, we went.
Far from home, Rice says mail call helps soldiers get through the days.
It meant so much to you to have something from home that you knew somebody was caring about you as much as you were over there doing what you were supposed to be doing.
Some soldiers never received letters, and Rice says they would just stop showing up for mail call.
A lot of them didn't have people at home, and a lot of them didn't want to, let anybody know they were there, because when they came home, they were the baby killer.
Back then, in order for a soldier to get anything, you had to have the soldier's name, rank, service number, complete address, and APO on the mailing label. No exceptions. That is, until Rice stumbled on a Dear Abby column asking what people wanted for Christmas that year.
I wrote her and I said, well, that's all I wanted, to see more smiles on people that didn't have mail. And mail was the main connection with anybody.
He wrote, please have them write to any lonely soldier in care of me, and I'll see that he gets it. Dear Abby published Rice's letter in 900 newspapers across the country with his address. And then,
one Sunday afternoon, I'll never forget it, I received 20,000 letters. And that's mailbag after mailbag after mailbag.
Rice kept a journal of how many letters addressed to any lonely soldier he received and from what states. He tried to match soldiers with letters from their home states as best he could.
That way they would have a connection when they came home. And that's what happened. A lot of the girls wrote to the guys, and some went home and got married.
The sheer volume of mail landed Rice in hot water with the feds. The way he tells it, almost 70,000 letters were sent back stamped, not authorized by the Department of Defense. The feds thought it might have been a money-making scam. All of the stamped letters created a bottleneck at the San Francisco post office, prompting then Congressman Bob Wilson to get involved. After ensuring that Rice was handling the mail appropriately and that no one else's mail was getting mixed in, the feds had no authority to send the letters back, and the law was changed.
And that's why the anonymous servicemen letter packages, including today, are getting mail without their name, address, and anything on it, just to a serviceman.
Morale grew, and Rice says soldiers lined up when it came time for mail call.
They would go there and they would get either a package or maybe a couple packages, and they'd get a couple letters or something. You could just see the smiles on their face.
Rice put together a scrapbook recounting everything that happened between 1967 and 1968. He donated it in November to the Delaware Public Archives for safekeeping.
The materials that are contained in this portfolio, scrapbook, changed a whole way of doing things with the United States Postal System and the Department of Defense. So this is one more piece of important documentation that has come into us.
I don't think the story will ever get out to where it needs to get out, to thank the people across the United States, that it is really a item that has been changed. One letter makes a big difference. And that made a big change to all the servicemen.
Rice volunteered for a second tour in 1972. His job? Mail clerk. Rice, who lives in Ellesmere, says the strangest things soldiers received in the mail, a live Christmas tree that was delivered with water still in the stand.
We have a few minutes before we head to First Experience, so we are definitely happy to have Senator Tom Carper here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle.
So first and foremost, we just came off a holiday weekend that seemed to have more than the usual terror warnings. Nothing happened, but do you think it was another case of the media just looking for news, or would you say it's another example of the new normal?
It's probably a combination of the two. The media is always looking for news. We basically in a 24/7 news cycle, so they're always looking for something. And it's 4th of July, a lot of people out, a lot of people together, and there are bad people around the world and some in this country who want to do harm and mischief. There's plenty of it going on in other places. We have been blessed here that to have suffered as little as we have, but we have to just continue to be ever aware, on guard, just preparing for the worst.
Let's turn to South Carolina, the lone wolf incident. Whether it's domestic or foreign, is something we should certainly face. How do you feel about that?
I think the president, in the eulogy that he gave for the pastor there, really captured it beautifully. And out of something tragic, he was asking the question, is there anything good that can come out of this? And my hope is that that perhaps something will. And racism still exists in this country, not to the extent when I grew up in Danville, Virginia, the last capital of the Confederacy, where they were still fighting the Civil War back in the 1950s and 60s, not literally, but figuratively speaking. And I remember eating it with my mom and my sister in lunch counters where it was like whites only, coloreds had to eat somewhere else, ride the bus to have lunch with my mom in Danville, Virginia on Saturdays. The blacks rode in back and whites got to ride up front. I remember going to school, and we went to a high school 10 miles from our house, and there's about 100 yards away, the African-American kids were waiting for their bus, and they got on their bus, and they rode by our school 10 miles away and another 10 miles to their school. I think something good may have come out of something awful.
The debate?
And the debate that's going on, and the question asking us to look in the mirror on questions of race and fairness. I'm a big believer in the golden rule. Most important rule of all, treat other people the way that we want to be treated, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And that's one that I don't care what faith you are, that is in your scripture, your sacred scripture somewhere, that admonition. And we're reminded of that all over again from Charleston.
Let's talk about the debate for a second. Is it a healthy one? Do you think it's healthy for us to discuss whether or not the Confederate flag should still be up?
I think it's probably a healthy debate. The Confederate flag, I think American people are divided almost exactly on whether or not it should be allowed to be presented or not. I think in public places where on government property, it shouldn't be there. And I think I commend the governor of South Carolina and others who said, let's take it down when it's on public land. And for folks who grew up in the southern part of the United States, like I did, it was, I'm sure for some people, it was a symbol of racism, slavery, a reminder of when there's white supremacy. For some people, it's just like being proud to be from the southern part of this country. So it's for different people, it's different things. I think what we have to do is put ourselves in the shoes of other people. How would you feel, how would I feel as a white guy if I were African American, if I was a descendant of slaves, and if my ancestors had been brutalized and torn from their homes, torn from their lands in Africa? How would I feel about it? Well, I probably wouldn't like it very much. So,
yeah. There's one at a private museum in Sussex County. The Confederate flag is hung. Do you think that's appropriate for right now?
Yeah, I think I know. I think it's at the Carriage Museum.
Yes.
Yes, Nutter Marvel's Carriage Museum. Private land, private operation. I think it's probably okay, and I think. But if you're going to have it like it's a Sussex County courthouse or at the Circle at Georgetown, which is a mile or two away from the private museum that you're talking about, it's a far different thing.
Well, let's talk some more politics. 2016, right around the corner. Do you think Joe Biden will run?
I think it's probably a coin flip. And at the end of the day, I think people in our state have some idea of how close-knit the family is, how interdependent they are. And I'm sure they're having a lot of soul-searching conversations and to try to figure out, I'm sure Joe wants to figure out what's best for his family, given Bo's untimely tragic death. And that for them, this is personal, this is family, and we just need to be patient and let them figure that out, work that out.
What about Hillary Clinton? Do you think she'll make a good president?
Oh, she would. I knew her when she was became First Lady. I didn't know her when she was First Lady of the Governor of Arkansas. But I've known her and Bill Clinton, President Clinton, for a long time. He was president for the same 8 years as I was governor. He used to be chairman of the National Governors Association. So was I. So was Jack Markell. And so there was a very close, tight-knit for those 8 years that he served, and I got to know her pretty well. She and I were both elected to the U.S. Senate on the same day.
Your thoughts on the Bernie Sanders movement?
Very good at messaging and addressing people, and has strong values and not all shy about mincing his words. He can be for all of his qualities, he could be a divisive person, and I think what we need now in this country, we need somebody who can unite us. Not divide us. We need someone who's able to remember the least of these, and how do we figure out how do we meet the needs of the least of these in our society. I think all too often we vote for people who are telegenic, maybe they're good on TV, maybe they're really good at raising money. What I think we really need are people with good values. I think Bernie has those.
Senator Tom Carper, always a pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank
Michelle.
you for giving us some time. Hope to see you soon.
You bet. Thanks so much.
In the early 19th century, long before cell phones and the internet, how would a young person manage to spend their time? Many turned to art. One form of art that was popular at the time was theorem painting. You say you never heard of it? Our first experience found that in historic Odessa, you can get a first-hand look.
The exhibit is a private collection. We're very excited to have the opportunity to show it to the public. It's called Stenciled, Painted and Framed, an American Theorem Collection. They're a form of folk art or naive painting, generally still lifes of fruit, flowers, and birds. It probably came from Europe to America, and it was prominent in this country until about 1840. Theorems were, in the early 19th century, an art craft form that really was produced by young people, young women. But it was really the creator's ability to blend tone and color, shade and light into the stenciled artwork that really made them dramatic and beautiful. They created stencils and applied the design to either velvet, so it's the first painting on velvet, or paper frequently, and occasionally silk. And once the stencils were transferred, then they were painted with either oil or water-based paints. Women were educated if they were from well-to-do families, and their education included learning to paint, learning to embroider and do needlework, and theorem was just the next step in that. It sort of faded in its popularity, and there could have been numerous reasons for that. Even photography, which eventually by the second half of the 19th century begins to replace these early art forms. I think it's wonderful to see this wonderful folk art. I mean, these things today are enchanting, and people are mesmerized by them. When you look forward into the future, it's always good to know about your past. I think it gives us insight into how we want things to proceed and how we want to live our lives today.
You can see the exhibit when you visit Odessa now through August 30th. There's also an exhibit of contemporary theorem paintings by Delaware artist Noreen Taylor that's on display in the Visitors Center. You can find information on all of this when you visit Odessa on the web at historicodessa.org.
Next week, a story from the Delaware Education Desk on a state education program which guides some economically challenged students to consider top-flight colleges after high school.
Look for those stories and more next time. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min and Nichelle Polston, I'm Mark Eichman. We leave you with some scenes of the soccer program at the Downs Elementary School in Newark. Have a great week.
Simon.